My name is Elena Mercer, and the night I turned 18, my father handed me a glass of champagne, smiled for the cameras, and whispered something that changed everything. "After the party, sweetheart, you'll sign a few documents for Uncle Raymond. Nothing complicated." I smiled back like an obedient daughter. Then I excused myself, walked upstairs to my bedroom, locked the door, opened my laptop, and transferred every single asset my grandparents had left me. The lake house, the investment accounts, the savings, every acre of land, into an irrevocable trust my grandfather created years earlier. By sunrise, my inheritance was untouchable. By breakfast, my father looked like someone had drained all the blood from his body. And by noon, my uncle discovered he had already signed a $470,000 real estate deal for property he never legally owned. But to understand why my grandparents built a legal fortress around me, you have to go back 6 years, to a fading lake cabin called Blackwater Point, and to the first warning my grandfather ever gave me. I was 12 the first summer Grandpa Walter took me to Blackwater Point alone. The cabin sat deep in the pine woods beside Lake Everett, hidden behind tall trees that swallowed most of the afternoon light. The porch leaned slightly to the left. One window refused to shut completely. The dock creaked whenever someone stepped near the edge. To anyone else, it looked old. To my grandfather, it looked loved. "Grab that toolbox, Lena," he said as he climbed beneath the porch with a flashlight between his teeth. I carried tools while he repaired warped boards and replaced rusted nails one by one. He treated every cracked piece of wood like it mattered. Around sunset, Grandma Eleanor brought us lemonade in cloudy glass jars and grilled cheese sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. The kitchen smelled like cedar smoke and cinnamon. It always smelled like that. That night, after dinner, Grandpa sat beside me on the dock, while the lake turned gold under the setting sun. "This place stays in the family," he said quietly. I smiled, obviously. He looked at me for a long moment. Not obviously. The way he said it made me glance at him again. "Family isn't always the people who share your blood, Elena. Family is the people who protect what matters when everyone else starts calculating what it's worth." At 12 years old, I thought he was just being philosophical. I didn't realize he was preparing me. Back home in Ashby Ridge, things felt different. Not bad, just cold in invisible ways. Our house was comfortable enough. 2 floors, trimmed hedges, expensive furniture nobody was allowed to sit on casually. My father, Martin Mercer, owned a hardware supply business that was slowly failing, though he hid it well behind pressed shirts and polished shoes. My younger sister Chloe had the renovated bedroom with string lights and fresh paint. Mine still had stains in the carpet from the previous owners. At dinner, Dad brought up the cabin constantly. "That property's wasting money sitting there," he said one evening while slicing steak. "Taxes alone are ridiculous." Mom nodded immediately. "We could sell it to developers and triple the value." Grandpa had said the cabin wasn't supposed to be sold. Dad laughed without looking at me. "Your grandfather also believed cassette tapes would come back." Conversation over. A week later, I found a brochure partially hidden beneath grocery coupons on the kitchen counter. "Lakeview Ridge Development, luxury waterfront properties coming soon." There was a handwritten phone number in the corner, not my father's handwriting. Uncle Raymond's. I remember staring at that paper longer than necessary, because for the first time, I realized the adults around me weren't talking about my grandparents' home like it held memories. They were talking about it like prey. Grandpa Walter died 2 years later. Rain hammered the cemetery umbrellas during the funeral. I sat in the second row clutching Grandpa's old blue handkerchief while relatives whispered around me. Near the dessert table afterward, I overheard my father speaking to Uncle Raymond. "We need to move fast before probate drags out," Raymond muttered. Dad nodded. They were discussing property distribution before the flowers on Grandpa's grave had even settled. I was 14 and invisible. Grandma Eleanor lasted another 2 years. By then, I spent nearly every weekend at Blackwater Point. I repaired porch screens, cleaned gutters, repainted shutters, learned how to drain pipes before winter freezes. Grandma watched me from the porch swing, with a blanket over her knees. One evening near the end, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "The cabin is yours, Elena." I froze. "Don't let them take it," I promised her. 3 days later, she was gone. That same night, I heard my father say something in the kitchen I never forgot. "Now we can finally deal with the property. Not mourn her, not miss her. Deal with the property." Something changed inside me after that. Not loudly, quietly, like ice forming over deep water. At 16, I found an envelope hidden behind old quilts in the cabin closet. My name was written across the front in Grandma Eleanor's handwriting. Inside was a business card. Victoria Hale, Attorney at Law, Mercer Family Trust. I carried that card in my wallet for nearly a year before using it. Then, 3 months before my 18th birthday, Victoria Hale called me herself. "Elena," she said calmly, "your grandparents asked me to contact you before you became a legal adult. There are things you need to know." I met her downtown the following Saturday. She explained everything. 6 years earlier, my grandparents had transferred Blackwater Point, multiple investment accounts, and over $2 million in assets into an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary was me. Not my father, not Uncle Raymond, me. The property had never entered probate. Legally, it was never part of my grandparents' estate after the trust was created. My father and uncle had spent years planning to sell something they did not own. Then Victoria sent the sentence that made my stomach tighten. "Someone has recently been asking the county recorder's office about the cabin title." After that meeting, I started listening carefully. And once I started listening, I heard everything. A week later, I overheard Uncle Raymond in the garage. "I already signed the purchase agreement with Horizon Development," he whispered. Dad sounded nervous. "What if Elena objects?" "What if Elena objects?" "She's 17, Raymond snapped. "By the time she figures anything out, the sale closes." Then came the sentence that made my hands go cold. "We'll throw her 50 grand for college." That means they're panicking. The week before my birthday became unbearable. My mother sat beside me on the couch, speaking softly, carefully rehearsed. "We all need to make sacrifices, Elena." Dad called the sale a family decision. Uncle Raymond cornered me in the driveway with fake smiles and numbers. $470,000 for lakefront property is a miracle offer. "And my share?" I asked. $50,000 cash. I stared at him. He smiled like he was offering charity. Then I asked the question that cracked his expression for half a second. "Whose name is on the deed?" He recovered quickly. "Your grandparents', which means it passes to family heirs." Not true. And somewhere deep down, he knew it. The night before my birthday, I drove to Blackwater Point alone. The lake was black glass beneath the moonlight. I sat on the porch beside Grandpa's empty chair, while Victoria emailed the final trust documents. At exactly midnight, I signed them. My acceptance as successor beneficiary. One signature, one timestamp, one legal wall slamming permanently into place. Victoria looked at me through the video call. "This isn't revenge, Elena. Your grandparents built this to protect you." Downstairs in my parents' garage, Uncle Raymond was preparing forged quitclaim paperwork at the exact same time. He just didn't know he was already too late. The next morning, Victoria filed a lis pendens the second the county recorder's office opened. At 9:07 a.m., Uncle Raymond walked in carrying forged paperwork and confidence. At 9:11 a.m., the clerk informed him the property belonged to the Mercer Family Irrevocable Trust. At 9:12 a.m., he learned the trust had existed for 6 years. At 9:13 a.m., he discovered a legal notice had already frozen the title. And at 9:14 a.m., my father realized his daughter knew everything. The call came 20 minutes later. Dad's voice shook with fury. "What did you do?" "I protected what Grandma and Grandpa left me. You went behind our backs with some lawyer." "They hired her 6 years ago, Dad. You just never asked questions because you assumed the cabin would eventually become yours." Silence. Then the quietest, most painful sentence I've ever spoken. "They just didn't trust you." He hung up. That afternoon, Horizon Development contacted me directly. Uncle Raymond had already signed a sales contract promising clear ownership. There was only one problem. He didn't own the property. The deal collapsed instantly. The penalty clause alone cost him $45,000. Then the county discovered the forged notary stamp. That turned the situation from civil disaster into potential criminal fraud. Within weeks, his real estate license was suspended. Horizon sued him. The county opened an investigation. The town found out everything. Small towns survive on 3 things: coffee, gossip, and public records. The strangest part? I never felt victorious. People imagine moments like this feel satisfying. They don't. Not when the people hurting you are your own family. I watched my father sit at the kitchen table looking 20 years older overnight. I watched my mother cry quietly when she thought nobody could hear her. I watched my little sister Chloe ask me in a trembling voice, "Are we still a family?" That question hurt more than every threat combined. A month later, I returned to Blackwater Point alone. Inside Grandpa's desk drawer was another letter Victoria had saved until the trust battle ended. In it, Grandpa wrote, "Your father sees value in dollars. You see value in care. That's why this place belongs with you." The final line shattered me completely. "Take care of the cabin. It took care of you first."